The rain hammered against the kitchen window as Maria Santos wiped down the marble countertop for the third time that evening. Her dark hands moved in practiced circles, removing every trace of the dinner preparation that had occupied her for the past 6 hours. The mansion stood silent around her, its 40 rooms echoing with the kind of emptiness that only vast wealth could afford. She glanced at the clock mounted above the commercial-grade stove. 11:45 at night. In 15 minutes, she would turn 32 years old. Maria had worked for the family for 7 years, ever since she arrived in New York from her small village in the Philippines. She remembered that first day so clearly, standing at the servants' entrance with her single battered suitcase, her broken English stumbling over simple greetings. Mrs. had looked her up and down with cool blue eyes that seemed to calculate her worth in seconds. The pay had been good, better than anything Maria could have dreamed of back home, and she had sent most of it to her mother and 3 younger siblings every month without fail. The mansion sprawled across 3 acres in the heart of Manhattan's Upper East Side, a limestone palace that whispered old money with every gilded fixture and hand-carved. Jonathan, the patriarch of the family, had made his billions in technology and investments, turning a modest inheritance into an empire that stretched across continents. His wife came from Boston Brahmin stock, and she never let anyone forget it. Their 2 children, Bethany and Christopher, had been raised by a rotating cast of nannies, tutors, and housekeepers like Maria, who existed in their world as necessary but largely invisible fixtures. Maria moved to the sink and began washing the crystal glasses by hand, even though the dishwasher stood ready. Mrs. insisted that the Waterford crystal be washed by hand always. The woman had left that afternoon for their estate in the Hamptons, taking Bethany with her. Christopher was away at Princeton. Mr. was supposedly working late at his office in Midtown, which meant Maria had the entire mansion to herself, a rare occurrence that usually brought her comfort, but tonight only emphasized her solitude. She dried the last glass and placed it carefully in the cabinet, then pulled out her phone. 3 messages from her mother in Tagalog asking about money for her brother's school fees. 2 from her cousin who also worked as a domestic worker in Queens, suggesting they meet for coffee on Sunday. 1 from the agency that had placed her with a reminder about renewing her work visa. Nothing from friends wishing her happy birthday, but then again she had not told anyone the date. What was the point? There would be no celebration, no cake, no gathering of loved ones. Maria walked to the small staff room off the kitchen where she kept her few personal belongings. From her locker, she pulled out a paper bag containing a single cupcake she had bought 3 days ago from a bodega on her day off. The frosting had started to look a bit tired, but it would do. She also retrieved a single birthday candle, the cheap kind that came in packs of 20 at the dollar store. She had bought them months ago with some vague idea of celebrating something, though she could not remember what. Back in the kitchen, she placed the cupcake on a small plate and pushed the candle into its center. The clock now read 11:58. She found a lighter in the utility drawer and stood there for a moment, feeling foolish. Here she was, a grown woman about to sing happy birthday to herself in someone else's kitchen at midnight. But there was no one else to do it, and she had learned long ago that if she did not mark the passing of her own life, no one would. At exactly midnight, she flicked the lighter and touched the flame to the wick. The tiny fire sputtered to life, casting a warm glow across the darkened kitchen. Maria closed her eyes and made a wish, the same wish she made every year, that someday she would save enough money to bring her family to America to give them the opportunities she had fought so hard to find. She drew in a breath to blow out the candle. "Don't." The voice cut through the silence like a knife, deep and commanding. Maria's eyes flew open and she spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. Jonathan stood in the doorway, still in his suit though his tie hung loose and his jacket was draped over one arm. He was 53 years old but looked younger, with silver threading through his dark hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Maria had always found him intimidating, a man who seemed to exist in a different atmosphere than ordinary people. "Mister," she stammered, her hand going to her chest. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were home. I thought you were working late. I was just finishing up and I'll go right now." "I said don't," he repeated, stepping into the kitchen. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to any space he occupied. "Don't blow out the candle yet, and don't apologize. It's your birthday, isn't it?" Maria stared at him, confused and off balance. How did he know it was her birthday? In 7 years, neither he nor his wife had ever acknowledged the date. She had filled out the information on her employment forms, of course, but she assumed such details disappeared into filing cabinets, unread and unremembered. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, her Filipino accent thickening with nervousness. "But it's nothing important. I was just being silly. I'll clean this up and leave right away." Jonathan set his jacket on one of the kitchen chairs and loosened his tie further. He looked tired, Maria noticed, with shadows under his eyes and deep lines bracketing his mouth. "How old are you today?" 32, sir." He nodded slowly, then moved to the wine fridge built into the kitchen cabinetry. Maria watched, bewildered, as he selected a bottle of champagne, an expensive vintage that Mrs. had been saving for some special occasion. He pulled 2 crystal flutes from the cabinet Maria had just organized and set them on the counter. "Mister, you don't have to," Maria began, but he held up a hand to silence her. 32 years old, working late on your birthday, celebrating alone in someone else's kitchen," he said, working the cork free with practiced ease. It came out with a soft pop. "That seems profoundly wrong to me." He poured the champagne, the golden liquid fizzing in the glasses, then slid one across the counter to Maria. She did not take it, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Everything about this situation violated the careful boundaries she had maintained for 7 years. Employers and employees did not drink together. They certainly did not celebrate birthdays together. She existed to serve, to be invisible, to maintain the smooth running of the household, without ever imposing her own humanity on the family. "I can't, sir," she said firmly. "It wouldn't be appropriate. I'm your employee." "You're a person," Jonathan said, his voice sharp. "A person who deserves to be acknowledged on her birthday. Now pick up the glass, Maria." The use of her first name startled her. Mrs. always called her by her last name, Santos, as if even that small intimacy of a given name might breach some essential wall. Maria hesitated, then slowly reached for the flute. The crystal felt impossibly delicate in her work-roughened hands. Jonathan raised his own glass. "To 32 years, may the next 32 be everything you hope for." They touched glasses with a soft clink. Maria took a small sip, and the champagne exploded across her tongue, complex and perfect. She had served this champagne dozens of times at the dinner parties, but had never imagined tasting it herself. It seemed to belong to another world, one she could clean and organize but never actually inhabit. "Make your wish," Jonathan said, gesturing to the candle still burning on the cupcake. "Properly this time without being interrupted." Maria looked at him, trying to understand what was happening. This man had walked past her thousands of times over the years, had issued instructions about meals and household matters, had existed in her life as a distant authority figure. She knew facts about him, his coffee preference, his allergy to shellfish, his habit of working through the night when stressed, but she did not know him, and he certainly did not know her. She closed her eyes again and made her wish, then blew out the candle. The kitchen returned to darkness except for the dim glow of the under-cabinet lighting. "What did you wish for?" Jonathan asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Maria said, allowing herself a small smile. "That's the rule." "I've never believed in following rules that don't make sense," he said, taking another sip of champagne. "But I'll respect your superstition. Come with me." He picked up his champagne flute and his jacket and walked toward the door. Maria did not move, confused. He paused in the doorway and looked back at her. "Come to me now, Maria. That's not a request." Something in his voice made her pick up her own glass and follow, her mind racing with questions and concerns. They walked through the darkened mansion, past rooms filled with furniture that cost more than Maria would earn in a decade, past walls hung with original artwork she had dusted countless times without really seeing. Jonathan led her to his private study, a room she had only entered to clean when he was not home. The study was all dark wood and leather, lined with and dominated by a massive desk that faced a wall of windows overlooking the private garden. Jonathan gestured for Maria to sit in one of the leather armchairs by the fireplace, then moved to light the gas fire. Flames sprang up, casting dancing shadows across the room. Maria perched on the edge of the chair, uncomfortable and acutely aware that she was still wearing her gray uniform dress and sensible shoes. This room smelled of expensive cologne, old books, and the faint smoke of cigars. It was unmistakably masculine, unmistakably his territory. Jonathan settled into the chair across from her and studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. 7 years, he said. "You've worked for us for 7 years, and I don't know anything about you. That's unforgivable." "You don't need to know anything about me, sir," Maria said carefully. I'm just here to do my job. Stop calling me sir, he said, a flash of irritation crossing his face. My name is Jonathan, and you're not just here to do a job. You're a human being who exists in my home, who takes care of my family, who apparently spends her birthdays alone eating convenience store cupcakes. I should know who you are. Maria took a larger sip of champagne, needing the courage it provided. Why does it matter now? After 7 years, why tonight? Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something Maria could not quite identify. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. Because tonight I realized that I've built an entire life surrounded by people I don't actually know. My wife is in the Hamptons because she can't stand to be in the same house with me anymore. My children call out of obligation, not affection. I employ a dozen people who keep my world running, and I couldn't tell you the first thing about their lives. Tonight, I came home to an empty house and saw you celebrating your birthday alone, and it struck me as the saddest thing I've ever witnessed. And the worst part is that I'm responsible for it. Maria did not know what to say. This kind of raw honesty from an employer was completely outside her experience. Mr. Jonathan, she corrected when he gave her a look. You're not responsible for my life. I choose to send my money home. I choose to work hard. I choose not to make a big deal about my birthday. Tell me about your family, he said, leaning forward. You send money home, where is home? And so Maria found herself talking, hesitantly at first, and then with increasing ease as the champagne worked its way through her system, and Jonathan listened with genuine attention. She told him about her village in the Philippines, about her mother who sold vegetables in the market, about her father who had died when she was 15. She spoke of her younger siblings, who wanted to be a nurse, who was good at math, and little who loved to draw. She explained how she had come to America on a work visa, how she had sacrificed everything for the chance to give them better lives than the poverty that had defined her childhood. Jonathan refilled her glass without asking, and Maria was surprised to find she had drained it. She never drank, certainly never expensive champagne, but tonight felt like it existed outside normal time, like a strange dream she would wake from in the morning. What about you? He asked. What do you want, not for them, for yourself? No one had ever asked her that question. Maria stared at him, trying to formulate an answer. I want to feel like I matter, she finally said, the words coming from some deep, unexamined place. Like I'm more than just the person who cleans up other people's messes. I want to belong somewhere to someone. I want my life to mean something beyond the money I can send home. The vulnerability of the admission made her flush with embarrassment. She set down her glass and stood abruptly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I should go to my room now. Maria, Jonathan stood as well, and he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody. Stay, please, just for a while longer. I know this is strange. I know I'm crossing every professional boundary, but I'm asking you to stay anyway. She should have left. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat to the safety of her small room in the servants' quarters, to restore the proper distance between employer and employee. But something in his eyes held her, a loneliness that matched her own, a desperate need for genuine human connection that she recognized because she felt it too. Okay, she whispered, for a little while. They sat back down, and Jonathan began to talk. He spoke of his own life with a candor that shocked her, the pressure of building and maintaining his empire, the slow death of his marriage, the realization that success had cost him everything that mattered. He talked about his children and the guilt he felt at being an absent father, about the endless treadmill of acquisition and achievement that never actually led to satisfaction. The fire burned low, the champagne bottle emptied, and Maria found herself seeing Jonathan not as her intimidating employer but as a man, flawed, lonely, searching for meaning in a life that had given him everything except happiness. At some point, their conversation shifted from words to silence, a comfortable quiet that felt more intimate than anything that had come before. Maria looked at the clock on the mantel and was startled to see it was past 3 in the morning. She had been talking with Jonathan for more than 3 hours. I really should go, she said, though she did not move. Jonathan reached across the small space between their chairs and took her hand. His touch was warm, his grip firm but not forceful. Thank you, he said, for the best conversation I've had in years, for reminding me what it feels like to actually connect with another person. Maria looked down at their joined hands, her dark skin against his pale skin, her calloused fingers intertwined with his manicured ones. Everything about this was impossible, inappropriate, dangerous. But it also felt more real than anything she had experienced since coming to America. "Happy birthday, Maria," Jonathan said softly. She met his eyes and saw something there that made her heart race. Not just loneliness anymore, but desire, possibility, the dangerous spark of something that could burn them both. She should pull her hand away. She should leave right now. She should restore the boundaries that had kept her safe for 7 years. Instead, she squeezed his hand back and whispered, "Thank you." Neither of them moved. The fire had burned down to embers. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. And Maria Santos, who had spent her 32nd birthday alone in a kitchen with a cheap cupcake and a dollar store candle, found herself sitting in her employer's study, holding his hand. On the edge, Omari awoke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and experienced a moment of complete disorientation before memory crashed back. She was in her own small room in the servants' quarters, still wearing her uniform dress from the night before, lying on top of the covers. Her head throbbed with the champagne she had consumed, and her mouth tasted like old carpet. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and checked the time, 9:30 in the morning. She had overslept by more than 2 hours. Panic jolted her fully awake. She never overslept. In 7 years of working for she had never once failed to begin her morning duties on time. Maria scrambled out of bed, her mind racing through the events of the previous night. The birthday candle, the champagne, the hours talking with Jonathan in his study, the way he had held her hand. And then, what? The memories grew hazy after the third glass of champagne. She remembered him walking her back to her room, his hand steady on her elbow to keep her from stumbling. She remembered standing at her door, some unspoken question hanging in the air between them. And then she remembered him saying good night and walking away, leaving her confused and oddly disappointed. She splashed cold water on her face in the tiny bathroom attached to her room and changed into a fresh uniform. Her reflection in the mirror looked different somehow, though she could not identify exactly how. Same dark eyes, same high cheekbones inherited from her father, same full mouth that she always thought was too wide. But something had shifted, some internal rearrangement that showed in her expression. Maria hurried to the kitchen, expecting to find it in chaos, but everything was exactly as she had left it. The cupcake and its melted candle sat on the counter where she had abandoned them. The champagne bottle and glasses were gone. Jonathan must have cleared them away himself. She quickly disposed of the cupcake and washed the plate, then began preparing fresh coffee and assembling the breakfast service, even though she knew the house was empty except for herself and possibly Jonathan. She had just finished grinding the coffee beans when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her entire body tensed. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, already dressed in casual slacks and a button-down shirt, looking remarkably fresh for someone who had been up drinking until dawn. His eyes found hers immediately, and Maria felt that same electric awareness that had hummed between them the night before. "Good morning," he said, his voice neutral and professional. "I hope you slept well." The formality of his tone felt like a slap after the intimacy they had shared. Maria herself with the coffee maker, her back to him. "Yes, sir. I apologize for oversleeping. It won't happen again." "Maria," his voice was closer now. She turned to find him standing just a few feet away, his expression serious. "About last night, I want to apologize if I made you uncomfortable in any way. I was out of line asking you to join me, keeping you up so late. It won't happen again." The words should have brought relief, but instead Maria felt a crushing disappointment. So that was it then. The entire evening had been an aberration, a temporary lapse in the normal order of things that both of them would now pretend had never happened. She forced herself to meet his eyes and keep her voice steady. "You didn't make me uncomfortable," she said carefully. "It was a kind gesture and I appreciated it, but you're right that it shouldn't happen again. I'm your employee and we both need to remember that." Something flickered in Jonathan's eyes, regret maybe or frustration, but he simply nodded. "I'm glad we understand each other. I'll be working from home today, just coffee for breakfast, nothing else." "Of course, sir." He left the kitchen, and Maria sagged against the counter, feeling like she had just survived some kind of test without knowing whether she had passed or failed. She poured him a cup of the fresh coffee and carried it on a tray to his study, where he was already seated at his desk, his attention focused on his laptop. He barely glanced up when she set the tray down, just murmured a distracted thanks that dismissed her more effectively than words. The rest of the day passed in a strange fog. Maria went through her usual routines, cleaning, organizing, preparing a simple lunch that Jonathan ate at his desk without calling her in. The house felt different now, charged with an awareness that had not existed before. Every time she heard his footsteps, her heart would race. Every time she passed the study door, she would slow down, hopping and dreading in equal measure that he might call her in. By evening, Maria was exhausted from the emotional whiplash. She prepared a light dinner and left it covered on the kitchen counter with a note, then retreated to her room. She had just changed into comfortable clothes when her phone rang. Her mother's face appeared on the screen, and Maria answered with a mix of guilt and affection. The conversation was entirely in Tagalog, her mother's voice crackling over the poor connection. How was Maria? Was she eating enough? Had she received the photos of his birthday party? And most importantly, when could Maria send the money for school fees? They were already a week late on the payment. Maria closed her eyes, calculating quickly in her head. She had planned to send money at the end of the week, but if needed it now, she would have to transfer it tomorrow. That would leave her with almost nothing for herself. But then again, when did she ever spend money on herself? Her entire existence was built around serving others. Her family back home, everyone except herself. After she hung up, Maria sat on her narrow bed and stared at the wall. This was her life. This was all it would ever be. The previous night had been a beautiful dream, a moment where she had felt seen and valued as a person rather than a function. But dreams ended, and reality was a small room in someone else's house, counting pennies to send home, existing in the margins of other people's lives. A knock on her door made her jump. Maria opened it to find Jonathan standing in the hallway, still in his casual clothes, holding a wrapped package. "May I come in?" he asked. Maria glanced behind her at the tiny room with barely space for the single bed, small dresser, and chair that constituted her entire living space. She had never had anyone in this room before, had always thought of it as her private sanctuary away from the grandeur of the rest of the house. "It's very small," she said uncertainly. "I don't care about the size." He stepped inside, and the room immediately felt smaller with his presence filling it. He looked around at her sparse belongings, the crucifix on the wall, the photo of her family on the dresser, the stack of well-worn paperback books she bought from thrift stores and read late at night. Jonathan held out the package. "I realized I never gave you a birthday present. That seemed like an oversight that needed correcting." Maria's hands trembled slightly as she took the package. It was wrapped in expensive paper, the kind that came from boutique stores rather than pharmacy gift wrap sections. "You didn't have to do this. You've already been too generous." "Open it," he said, and there was an intensity in his voice that made it impossible to refuse. She carefully unwrapped the paper, trying not to tear it, and found a leather-bound journal inside. The cover was soft and supple, dyed a deep burgundy, with her initials embossed in gold in the lower corner. She opened it to find thick, cream-colored pages, completely blank and waiting to be filled. "I noticed you reading last week in the garden," Jonathan said, "and I thought everyone should have a place to put their own words, their own thoughts, not just consume other people's stories but create their own." Maria ran her fingers over the smooth leather, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. This was not some generic present grabbed by an assistant. This was something Jonathan had chosen himself, had taken time to consider. Her initials proved that. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." "I also wanted to apologize again for my behavior last night," Jonathan said. "Not for spending time with you. I meant what I said about that being the best conversation I've had in years. But for putting you in an awkward position, for blurring lines that need to stay clear for both our sakes." Maria set the journal down carefully on her dresser and turned to face him. The room was so small that they were standing barely 2 feet apart, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the conflict in his eyes. "What if I don't want the lines to stay clear?" The words escaped before she could stop them, shocking her with their boldness. Jonathan's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something darker and more complex. "Maria, you don't know what you're saying. I'm your employer. I have power over you. Anything between us would be inherently unequal, inherently wrong." "You think I don't know that?" Maria's voice rose, fueled by frustration and champagne courage that was entirely imaginary since she had not had a drop to drink. "You think I haven't thought about every single reason why this is impossible, but that doesn't change the fact that for the first time in 7 years, someone looked at me and saw me. Not the maid, not the servant, not the invisible person who cleans up after everyone. You saw Maria, the person. And I can't just pretend that didn't matter. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with possibility and danger. Jonathan reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step back, and cupped her face in his hand. His palm was warm against her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with a gentleness that made her breath catch. If we do this, he said quietly, everything changes. Your job, this house, the careful balance we've maintained. Are you willing to risk all of that? Maria thought about her family depending on the money she sent home. She thought about her work visa tied to this employment. She thought about every practical reason to step away, to thank him for the journal and politely close the door. And then she thought about the suffocating loneliness of her life, the way she had spent 32 years making herself smaller and smaller to fit into other people's expectations. I'm tired of being invisible, she said. Even if this all falls apart, even if it's a terrible mistake, at least I'll know what it feels like to be seen. Jonathan closed the distance between them and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost questioning, and Maria answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became urgent, and Maria felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her against him, and she could feel his heart racing as fast as her own. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Jonathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. We can't do this here, he said. Not in this room, not like this. You deserve better. I don't care where we are, Maria said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew he was right. This room was too small, too much a reminder of her status as an employee. If they were going to cross this line, it needed to be somewhere else, in some space that belonged to neither of them. Come with me, Jonathan said, taking her hand. He led her through the quiet mansion to a part of the house Maria had only cleaned but never truly occupied. The guest wing with its luxurious suites, designed for visitors who rarely came. He opened the door to one of the bedrooms, a beautiful space decorated in shades of cream and gold, with a massive four-poster bed and windows overlooking the garden. The room was neutral territory, Maria realized. Not his bedroom, not hers. A space between spaces where they could exist outside the normal hierarchies of their relationship. Jonathan turned to face her in the doorway. Last chance to change your mind. Once we do this, we can't undo it. Maria thought about all the reasons to say no. She thought about all the ways this could destroy her carefully constructed life. And then she thought about dying someday with a list of regrets as long as her arm, and at the top of that list would be this moment, this chance, this man who saw her as more than the sum of her duties. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. What followed was tender and awkward and perfect all at once. They undressed each other slowly, Maria's hands shaking as she unbuttoned his shirt, Jonathan's touch reverent as he helped her out of her simple clothes. When they finally came together, it felt like something breaking and healing at the same time, two lonely people finding brief sanctuary in each other. Afterwards, they lay tangled in the expensive sheets, not speaking, just existing in the fragile bubble they had created. Maria traced patterns on Jonathan's chest, marveling at the surreal reality of where she was and what she had just done. What happens now? She finally asked. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. I've spent my entire life planning and strategizing, always thinking 5 moves ahead, but I have no idea what comes next. Your wife, Maria said, forcing herself to voice the complication they had both been avoiding. She'll come back from the Hamptons eventually. My wife and I have been done for years, Jonathan said. We stay married for appearances, for tax purposes, for a dozen practical reasons that have nothing to do with love. But you're right that this complicates things. If anyone found out about us, it would be a scandal. It could hurt your immigration status, your job prospects. I won't let that happen to you. Maria appreciated his concern, but part of her chafed at the implication that she needed protection, that she could not make her own choices about risk. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be sheltered, she said. I've survived poverty, immigration, 7 years of making myself invisible. I can handle whatever comes. Jonathan pulled her closer, his arms tight around her. I'm beginning to realize that you can handle just about anything, but I still want to protect you. Is that so wrong? Before Maria could answer, her phone buzzed on the nightstand where she had left it. She reached for it and saw a message from her cousin. There had been a raid on a house in Queens where several Filipino domestic workers lived. Immigration officials had arrested 3 women, all of whom were now facing deportation. The message was like cold water, shocking Maria back to reality. This was the precarious life she lived, balanced on the edge of rules and regulations, always one mistake away from losing everything. And what she had just done with Jonathan, if anyone found out, if Mrs. decided to make trouble, if the wrong person learned about their relationship, it could give someone the excuse they needed to destroy her. Jonathan must have sensed the change in her mood. He sat up, concerned. "What's wrong?" Maria showed him the message. "This is my life," she said. "This is what I risk every single day, and now I've added this to it." She gestured between them. "I'm not saying I regret it, but we need to be realistic about what we're doing." Jonathan took her hand, his expression serious. "I won't let anything happen to you. I have lawyers, resources, influence. If there's ever any threat to your status here, I'll handle it." "You can't promise that," Maria said gently. "You have power, yes, but you're not invincible, and I won't let you ruin your own life trying to protect mine." They sat in silence, the weight of reality settling over them. Finally, Jonathan spoke. "So what do you want to do? End this now before it goes any further. Pretend last night and tonight never happened." Maria thought about going back to her small room, to her invisible existence, to birthdays spent alone with dollar store candles. She thought about the feeling of Jonathan's hands on her skin, the way he looked at her like she mattered, the first real connection she had felt in years. "I want to be careful," she said. "I want to be smart about this, but I don't want to stop. Is that possible? Can we have this and still protect everything else?" "I'll make it possible," Jonathan said with the confidence of someone used to bending the world to his will. "We'll be discreet, we'll be careful, and I'll start making arrangements for your situation, your visa, your family. I can help with all of that without anyone suspecting anything." "I don't want your charity," Maria said sharply. "It's not charity. It's caring about someone and wanting to make their life easier. Let me do this, please." Maria knew she should refuse, should maintain her independence, should not let herself become even more entangled in Jonathan's world. But the thought of her siblings getting the education they deserved, of her mother not having to sell vegetables in the market until she was too old to stand, of her own future being more secure, it was seductive. "Okay," she whispered, "but we do this my way. No grand gestures, no obvious changes. Everything has to look normal from the outside." "Agreed," Jonathan said. They stayed in that room until nearly dawn, talking and making love and planning a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. When Maria finally slipped back to her own room as the sky lightened, she felt transformed, like she had shed an old skin and grown a new one overnight. Over the following days, they established a careful routine. During the day, Maria performed her duties exactly as she always had, and Jonathan treated her with the same professional courtesy he had always shown. But at night, after the rest of the household staff had gone to their rooms, they would meet in the guest wing or Jonathan's study, stealing hours together that felt separate from the rest of their lives. Maria discovered sides of Jonathan she had never imagined: his dry sense of humor, his surprising knowledge of art and literature, his genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. He asked about her life in the Philippines, about her dreams for the future, about her favorite books and foods and childhood memories. And in return, he shared his own vulnerabilities, the pressure he felt to maintain his empire, the regrets he carried about his children, the slow realization that success had cost him his soul. 2 weeks after her birthday, Maria received news that changed everything. Jonathan had arranged for an immigration lawyer to review her case, and the lawyer had found a path to a green card. The green card news should have brought Maria pure joy, but instead it filled her with conflicted emotions. On one hand, it represented freedom, from the constant fear of deportation, from total dependence on from the precarious edge she had balanced on for 7 years. On the other hand, it deepened her entanglement with Jonathan in ways that made her uncomfortable. She did not want to owe him her future, did not want their relationship to be built on gratitude and obligation. She confronted him about it one night in his study, where they had fallen into the habit of meeting after midnight. The rest of the house slept, and the study had become their sanctuary, a place where they could simply be Maria and Jonathan rather than maid and employer, lover and secret keeper. "Why did you really do this?" she asked, curled up in the leather armchair that had become hers. "The lawyer, the green card application. Is it because you care about me or because you want to make sure I can't leave?" Jonathan looked up from the financial reports he had been reviewing, his reading glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. "Can't it be both?" he said. "I care about you, Maria, more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time. And yes, part of me wants to make sure you have reasons to stay. Is that so wrong?" "It is if the reasons are about obligation rather than choice," Maria said. "I don't want to be here because I owe you. I want to be here because I choose to be." Jonathan removed his glasses and set them aside, giving her his full attention. "Then think of it this way, the green card gives you more choice, not less. Right now, you're tied to this job because of your visa. Once you have permanent residency, you can work anywhere, do anything. You could leave tomorrow if you wanted to, and I couldn't stop you. Doesn't that sound like more freedom, not less?" He was right, of course, but Maria still felt the weight of the gesture. In her world, nothing came without strings attached, without some expectation of reciprocity. 7 years of working for wealthy people had taught her that generosity always carried a price tag, even when it was not immediately visible. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Really want, I mean, because this can't just keep going the way it is, hiding in guest rooms and meeting after midnight like we're doing something wrong." "We are doing something wrong," Jonathan said. "By any conventional standard, this relationship violates every professional boundary, every ethical guideline. I'm your employer. I have power over you. The fact that we both want this doesn't change those fundamental realities." "So what are you saying? That we should end it?" "No," his voice was firm. "I'm saying we need to change the circumstances. I've been thinking about this constantly, Maria. I want to be with you, really be with you, not hiding and sneaking around. But that means making some difficult changes." Maria's heart began to race. What kind of changes? Jonathan stood and came to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. The position put them at eye level, and Maria could see the determination in his face, the resolution of someone who had made a decision and would not be swayed from it. "I'm going to ask for a divorce," he said. "A real one this time, not the legal separation we've been living in for years. It's going to be messy and expensive and public, but it's necessary. And I want to set you up in your own place, somewhere outside this house, where you can have independence and dignity. You can keep working here if you want, or you can find other work, or you can go to school, whatever you choose. But I won't have you living in a servant's room while we're together. It's not right." The enormity of what he was proposing crashed over Maria like a wave. "You can't do that," she said, pulling her hands free. "You can't blow up your entire life for me. Your wife, your reputation, your family. Jonathan, I'm not worth all that." "Don't you dare say that," he said, his voice sharp. "Don't you dare diminish yourself like that. You're worth everything, Maria. You're worth more than this sneaking around, more than stolen moments in the middle of the night. I want to be able to take you to dinner, to be seen with you in public, to introduce you to people as someone who matters to me." "People will judge you," Maria said. "They'll say terrible things. The rich white man leaving his society wife for the Filipino maid. Can you imagine what the tabloids would do with that story?" "Let them judge, let them talk. I've spent my entire life caring about what people think, crafting the perfect image, maintaining appearances. And what has it gotten me? A loveless marriage, children who barely know me, a life so empty I didn't even realize it until I saw you lighting a birthday candle alone in my kitchen. I'm done living for other people's approval." Maria wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he understood what he was offering to sacrifice. But she had seen how the world worked. She had cleaned the houses of enough wealthy people to know that love did not always survive the harsh light of public scrutiny and social judgment. "Your children," she said, "they'll hate me. They'll see me as the woman who broke up their parents' marriage. My children know their mother, and I have been done for years. Bethany is 23 and Christopher is 21. They're adults. Yes, it will be awkward and complicated, but they'll adjust. And if they can't accept you, then that's something they and I will have to work through." Over the next few weeks, Jonathan began the process of disentangling his life from us. He met with lawyers, accountants, and advisors, setting in motion the machinery of a high society divorce. Maria watched from the sidelines, still performing her duties during the day, still meeting Jonathan at night, but feeling increasingly like a spectator in her own life. Returned from the Hamptons in early February, and the temperature in the house dropped perceptibly. She was a tall, thin woman with hair going gracefully gray, and the kind of understated elegance that came from old money and older breeding. She treated Maria with the same cool courtesy she always had, never quite rude but never warm, existing in a separate sphere that rarely intersected with the help. Maria was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard raised voices from the direction of the master bedroom. She tried not to listen, but the mansion's acoustics carried sound in unexpected ways, and certain words cut through clearly: divorce, affair, humiliation. She felt sick to her stomach, knowing she was the unnamed cause of the argument. Later that day, summoned her to the sitting room off the master bedroom. Maria climbed the stairs with dread pooling in her stomach, certain that somehow knew that this was the confrontation she had been dreading. Sat in a wingback chair by the window, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside her. She did not invite Maria to sit, so Maria stood, her hands clasped in front of her, every inch the deferential servant. Santos said, using her last name as she always did. My husband tells me he's very pleased with your work. He suggests we give you a raise and expanded responsibilities. Maria's mind raced. Was this a trap, a test, or did Jonathan's praise represent his attempt to shore up her position before everything came crashing down? Thank you, ma'am, Maria said carefully. I'm very happy in my current role. His blue eyes were sharp as they studied Maria's face. Are you? Happy, I mean, working here, living in that tiny room, sending all your money home to your family. That doesn't sound like happiness to me. That sounds like obligation. The observation was so unexpectedly perceptive that Maria did not know how to respond. She had never imagined that thought about her life at all, much less analyzed it for signs of happiness or its absence. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work here, Maria said, falling back on safe, neutral language. Gratitude isn't happiness, said. She picked up her teacup, took a sip, then set it down with a delicate clink. I'm going to tell you something, Santos, and I want you to listen carefully. I've been married to Jonathan for 28 years. I know him better than he knows himself, and I know when he's lying, when he's hiding something, when he's having an affair. Maria's blood turned to ice. This was it then, the confrontation she had dreaded. She would be fired, possibly deported, certainly humiliated. She opened her mouth to defend herself, to deny everything, but held up a hand. I don't care, said flatly. Whatever he's doing, whoever he's doing it with, I genuinely do not care. Our marriage has been a business arrangement for more than a decade. We maintain appearances, we fulfill our social obligations, we exist in the same house and share a last name. That's all there is between us. So if Jonathan has found someone who makes him feel alive again, good for him. I hope she knows what she's getting into. The pronoun hit Maria like a slap. She knows. Knows, and she is choosing not to acknowledge it directly, not to make it real by numbing it. It was a very upper-class response, Maria thought. Ignore the uncomfortable truth, maintain the veneer of civility, pretend everything is as it should be. I don't know what you mean, ma'am, Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Laughed, a brittle sound without humor. Of course you don't. Well, regardless, you should be prepared. Jonathan is going to ask me for a divorce, and I'm going to give him one. It will be expensive for him and lucrative for me, and it will create an enormous mess that will affect everyone in this household. I wanted to give you advance warning so you can make whatever arrangements you need to make. Thank you, ma'am, Maria said, not knowing what else to say. One more thing, said as Maria turned to leave. Whatever happens, don't underestimate how difficult this will be. Being with a man like Jonathan comes with expectations and scrutiny that you can't imagine. The tabloids, the social circles, the constant judgment. If you're not prepared for that, you should walk away now before you're in too deep. The warning was almost kind, delivered with something approaching genuine concern. Maria met's eyes and saw not hostility but a strange sort of sympathy, as if recognized in her a fellow traveler on a difficult road. I appreciate the advice, Maria said. That night when she told Jonathan about the conversation, he was furious. She had no right to speak to you that way, to make you uncomfortable in your own home. It's not my home, Maria said quietly. That's the whole problem, isn't it? This is your house, your world, I'm just passing through it. Not for much longer, Jonathan said. I found an apartment for you. Well, a condo, actually. 2 bedrooms, beautiful kitchen in a good neighborhood. I want you to look at it tomorrow and see if you like it. Maria felt her independence being eroded with each generous gesture, each solution Jonathan offered to problems she had not asked him to solve. I can't afford a condo in a good neighborhood, she said. Not on my salary. You won't be paying for it, Jonathan said, and when Maria started to protest, he cut her off. Listen to me. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Letting you struggle financially when I could easily help makes no sense. Think of it as an investment in our future together." "I don't want to be kept," Maria said, the words coming out harsher than she intended. "I don't want to be the mistress in the nice apartment waiting for you to visit when you have time." Jonathan pulled her close, his arms tight around her. "You're not my mistress. You're the woman I love, and I want you to have security, safety, a place that's yours. Is that really so terrible?" The casual use of the word love stopped Maria's protests in her throat. They had never said that word before, had danced around it carefully, both aware of the weight it carried. Now it hung in the air between them, undeniable and terrifying. "Say that again," Maria whispered. "I love you," Jonathan said, looking into her eyes. "I'm in love with you. I think I have been since I saw you lighting that birthday candle alone, but I was too much of a coward to admit it. I love your strength, your intelligence, the way you never let me get away with anything. I love talking to you, being with you, the person I am when I'm around you. Is that clear enough?" Maria felt tears sliding down her cheeks, though she could not have said whether they were happy or sad or some complicated mixture of both. "I love you too," she said, "but I'm terrified of what that means." "So am I," Jonathan admitted. "But I'd rather be terrified and together than safe and alone, wouldn't you?" The next day, Maria went to see the condo Jonathan had found. It was in a neighborhood called Brooklyn Heights, with tree-lined streets and brownstone buildings that glowed warm in the winter sun. The condo itself was on the third floor of a converted townhouse, with high ceilings and hardwood floors and windows that let in floods of natural light. The kitchen was small but modern, with appliances Maria recognized from upscale catalogs. The bedrooms were generously sized, and the bathroom had a deep soaking tub that looked like something from a magazine. The real estate agent showing her around assumed Maria was looking for a place for her employers and spoke to her accordingly. Maria did not correct the assumption, just walked through the rooms feeling increasingly overwhelmed. This place cost more per month than she currently made in 3 months. She could never afford it on her own, which meant accepting it would make her completely dependent on Jonathan. But another voice in her head whispered seductively, "Why not? Why not accept this gift, this chance at a better life?" She had spent 32 years being practical and self-sacrificing, putting everyone else's needs before her own. Maybe it was time to be selfish, to take what was being offered, to let someone take care of her for once. "I'll take it," she told the agent, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff. The move happened quickly. Maria gave notice to the other household staff that she was relocating for personal reasons, but would continue working during the day. She packed her few belongings into boxes and moved them to the new condo with Jonathan's help. He hired movers to bring in furniture he had selected: a comfortable couch, a real bed instead of the narrow cot she had slept on in the mansion, a dining table with chairs that matched. Her cousin helped her unpack, chattering excitedly in Tagalog about Maria's good fortune while also probing gently for details about how exactly Maria had managed to afford such a nice place. Maria deflected the questions, saying only that she had gotten a very good deal and had been saving money for years. Looked skeptical but did not push, though Maria could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. The first night in her new home, Maria sat on her couch and looked around at the space that was supposedly hers. Everything was beautiful, comfortable, expensive. And it all felt like a gilded cage, beautiful bars that would keep her trapped just as surely as the servant's room had. Only now the trap was made of gratitude and dependence rather than necessity and obligation. Jonathan arrived around 8, letting himself in with the key Maria had given him. He brought Chinese food from her favorite restaurant, the one she had mentioned once in passing, and was surprised he remembered. They ate together at her new dining table, and he asked about her day, seemed genuinely interested in the mundane details of her life. After dinner, they moved to the couch, and Jonathan pulled her close. This felt different from their stolen moments in the mansion, more real somehow, more like an actual relationship. In this space, they were not employer and employee sneaking around. They were just two people who had found each other against all odds and were trying to build something real. "What are you thinking?" Jonathan asked, running his fingers through her hair. "That this doesn't feel real yet," Maria admitted. "That I keep waiting for someone to come tell me there's been a mistake, that I don't belong in a place like this." "You belong anywhere you choose to be," Jonathan said. "Stop letting your past define your future. You're not that scared girl who arrived in America with a single suitcase anymore. You're a woman who deserves good things, beautiful things, a life that's more than just survival. Maria wanted to believe him. She wanted to shed the mentality of scarcity and fear that had defined most of her life. But it was not so easy to reprogram 32 years of conditioning, to suddenly believe she was worthy of luxury and love, and all the things she had only ever experienced from the outside looking in. Over the following weeks, Maria settled into a strange double life. During the day, she still went to the mansion and performed her duties, though now she was technically a daily employee rather than live-in staff. Had accepted the divorce papers Jonathan served and was cooperating with remarkable civility, presumably because her lawyers had negotiated an extremely generous settlement. The household staff gossiped about the divorce in whispered conversations that stopped whenever Maria entered a room, and she knew they suspected something but had no proof. At night, Maria returned to her condo, and more often than not, Jonathan would join her. They cooked dinner together, watched movies, made love in her comfortable bed, talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his day, his business deals, his frustrations and victories. She shared stories about her family in the Philippines, her dreams of one day opening her own business, maybe a catering company or a small restaurant. Jonathan encouraged those dreams, even started making plans to help fund them. He introduced her to his accountant, who helped her set up a proper business plan. He connected her with a commercial real estate agent who specialized in restaurant spaces. He was, in his efficient way, trying to give her the independence she claimed to want while simultaneously making her more reliant on his resources and connections. Maria appreciated the help but also felt smothered by it. Every time she tried to do something on her own, Jonathan had a contact who could do it better, a resource that would make it easier. His generosity was overwhelming, and sometimes she caught herself resenting him for it, for making her feel perpetually grateful, perpetually in his debt. They had their first real fight on a rainy evening in March. Jonathan had spent the day at the mansion dealing with contractors who were renovating several rooms now that had moved out. He arrived at Maria's condo exhausted and irritable, complaining about incompetent workers and cost overruns. Maria listened for a while, then said, "You know, you could just sell that place. It's too big for one person anyway. Start fresh somewhere new." Jonathan looked at her like she had suggested he set fire to the mansion. "That house has been in my family for 3 generations. I can't just sell it." "Why not? It's just a building. Just stuff and rooms and memories, most of which aren't even good ones based on what you've told me." "You don't understand," Jonathan said, his voice tight. "That house represents something. It's a symbol of everything my family has built, everything I've achieved. Selling it would be admitting failure." "Or it would be admitting that you've it," Maria said. "That you want something different now. What's wrong with that?" The argument spiraled from there, each of them defending positions that had less to do with the house and more to do with deeper fears and insecurities. Jonathan accused Maria of not understanding the weight of legacy and responsibility. Maria accused Jonathan of being more concerned with appearances than with building an authentic life. They said things they did not quite mean, voices rising until finally Maria told him to leave. He stood at her door, his hand on the knob, looking back at her with hurt and anger in his eyes. "This is what you want, to push me away when things get difficult." "No," Maria said, exhausted suddenly. "But I need you to understand that I'm not some project you can fix with your money and your connections. I'm a person with my own ideas about what I want my life to look like. And sometimes that's going to conflict with what you want, and we're going to have to figure out how to navigate that without you just steamrolling over me because you're used to getting your way." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed the door and came back to her, pulling her into his arms. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry, I do that, try to solve problems by throwing resources at them. It's how I've operated my entire life. But you're not a problem to be solved. You're my partner, and I need to start treating you like one." They made up that night, both of them trying harder to listen, to understand, to make space for each other's perspectives. It was not perfect. They were too different, from 2 different worlds, with too much baggage for perfect. But it was real. And for Maria, that realness was more valuable than all the luxury Jonathan could provide. Spring arrived in New York with the tentative warmth of someone testing cold water, and with it came the inevitable public exposure of Maria and Jonathan's relationship. The divorce proceedings between Jonathan and had been moving forward with surprising smoothness, both parties eager to end a marriage that had been dead in all but legal terms for years. But the tabloids had caught wind of the Billionaire's split, and reporters started digging for the story behind the story. Maria was photographed leaving her condo one morning, and someone must have done the research because by that evening, articles appeared online speculating about Jonathan's mysterious new girlfriend. The headlines were predictably sensational and tinged with racism barely disguised as curiosity. Billionaire trades society wife for former maid. From servant to sweetheart. The Cinderella story of Maria Santos. Did's housekeeper break up his marriage? Maria sat on her couch reading the articles on her phone, feeling sick to her stomach. They had reduced her entire life, her entire identity, to a salacious headline designed to get clicks. The comment sections were worse, filled with people who had never met her making assumptions about her character, her motivations, her worth. Some called her a gold digger. Others suggested she had deliberately seduced Jonathan to improve her circumstances. A few were overtly racist, using slurs that made Maria's hands shake with anger. Jonathan arrived to find her crying, her phone discarded on the couch beside her. He gathered her into his arms without speaking, just held her while she sobbed out her humiliation and rage. "I told you this would happen," she said when she could finally speak. "I warned you what people would say." "I know," Jonathan said, "and I was naive to think we could somehow avoid it. I'm sorry, Maria. I'm so sorry you're going through this." "It's not just me," Maria said, pulling back to look at him. "It's my family, too. My mother called this morning, hysterical. Someone from a tabloid contacted her in the Philippines asking questions about me. My siblings are getting harassed at school, even won't return my calls. I think she's embarrassed to be associated with me now that I'm front-page news." The isolation of her new life hit Maria with crushing force. She had sacrificed her anonymity, her reputation, her place in the Filipino community that had been her support system, all for a relationship that felt increasingly fragile in the harsh light of public scrutiny. "We need to make a statement," Jonathan said, his jaw set in a way Maria had learned meant he had made a decision and would not be swayed. "Control the narrative before it controls us. I have a publicist who can help craft our story, present it in a way that's sympathetic." "Our story," Maria repeated. "You mean make up a version of events that's more palatable to people? Pretend we met some other way, that I wasn't your maid when we fell in love." "Not make up, just emphasize different aspects. The truth is messy and complicated, and people don't do well with messy and complicated. They want a simple story they can understand." Maria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. People passed by going about their ordinary lives, unaware that they were being watched by someone whose face had been splashed across gossip websites. She thought about her mother selling vegetables in the market, about her siblings trying to get through their school days while being pointed at and whispered about. "No," she said quietly. "No what?" "No publicist, no managed narrative, no carefully crafted story. If we're going to do this, we do it with the truth, all of it. Yes, I was your maid. Yes, we fell in love despite the circumstances being completely inappropriate. Yes, it's messy and complicated and raises all kinds of questions about power and ethics. But it's real, Jonathan. What we have is real, and I won't apologize for it or try to make it more palatable for strangers." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he joined her at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "You're right," he said. "I've spent too much of my life managing appearances, crafting the perfect image. If I'm going to build a new life with you, it needs to be based on truth, not public relations." They held a press conference the following week, against the advice of Jonathan's lawyers and business advisors. They sat together in front of cameras and reporters and simply told the truth. Jonathan spoke about his failing marriage, his loneliness, the chance conversation on Maria's birthday that had opened his eyes to how disconnected he had become from genuine human connection. Maria talked about her journey from the Philippines, her years of service to the family, the birthday candle that had sparked an unlikely conversation that changed both their lives. The questions from reporters were sometimes hostile, often skeptical. Was Maria concerned about the power imbalance in the relationship? Did Jonathan see the ethical problems with pursuing an employee? How did they respond to accusations that their relationship was inappropriate? Maria answered with more honesty than Jonathan's team would have preferred. Yes, the power imbalance concerned her. Yes, there were ethical gray areas they were still navigating. Yes, she understood why people questioned their relationship. But she also spoke about love, about connection, about two lonely people finding each other in unexpected circumstances. She refused to be ashamed of her feelings or to pretend they were something other than what they were. The press conference did not stop the gossip or the judgment, but it took some of the oxygen out of the story. By facing the cameras and speaking plainly, Maria and Jonathan had the tabloids the mystery and speculation that fueled their coverage. The story gradually moved from the front pages to the inside columns, then disappeared altogether as new scandals captured public attention. But the damage to Maria's personal relationships remained. Her mother remained distant, hurt that Maria had not confided in her about Jonathan, worried about what people in their village were saying. Her siblings sent dutiful messages, but no longer called as frequently. Finally responded to Maria's texts with a curt message saying she needed time to process everything. The Filipino community that had been Maria's anchor in New York had essentially excommunicated her. At church, women who used to greet her warmly now looked past her as if she were invisible. The domestic workers she had considered friends stopped inviting her to their gatherings. Maria found herself more isolated than she had been even in her early days in America, when at least she had the anonymity of being a nobody. Jonathan tried to fill the void with his own social circle, inviting Maria to dinners and events with his business associates and their wives. But Maria felt painfully out of place in those settings, surrounded by people who had gone to Ivy League schools and summered in the Hamptons, whose casual conversation referenced experiences and places Maria had only read about. They were polite to her, sometimes even kind, but she could feel their curiosity, their silent questions about what exactly she was doing in their world. The only bright spot was Jonathan's children, who proved surprisingly accepting of the relationship. Bethany, his daughter, came to visit the condo one afternoon in April and sat with Maria in the kitchen over tea. "I wanted to hate you," Bethany said with the blunt honesty of someone in their early 20s who had not yet learned to soften truth with diplomacy. "I thought you were some opportunist who had seduced my father for his money. But then I saw the press conference, and I saw how he looked at you, and I realized something important." "What's that?" Maria asked, nervous about where this conversation was heading. "That my father is happy for the first time in my entire life. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even my mother back when they pretended to love each other. So whatever you are to him, whatever this relationship is, it's making him into a better person, a more real person, and I can't hate you for that." The conversation brought Maria to tears, though she tried to hide it. Bethany's acceptance felt like a gift she had not expected and did not quite deserve. Christopher, Jonathan's son, was more reserved in his approval but sent a text message saying simply, "Dad seems happy. That's good enough for me." With the children's blessing and indifference, the divorce moved to completion by early summer. Jonathan divided their assets with the efficiency of business partners dissolving a company, each taking what they wanted without much argument. Kept the Hamptons estate and a significant cash settlement. Jonathan kept the Manhattan mansion and the bulk of his business interests. The day the divorce was finalized, Jonathan showed up at Maria's condo with champagne and a proposal that was not quite a proposal. "Move in with me," he said. "Not to the mansion, I know you hate that place. We'll find somewhere new, somewhere that's ours together, a fresh start." Maria had been expecting this conversation but still felt unprepared for it. Moving in together would be another step deeper into their relationship, another bridge burned behind her. But she also recognized the truth. She was already in this completely. There was no going back to her old life, no way to reclaim the anonymity and safety she had sacrificed. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them." "We find a place together and I contribute to the cost proportionally. I won't live somewhere I can't afford on my own if I had to. And I want to start my catering business, really start it, not just plan it. I need something that's mine, separate from you and your money and your connections." Jonathan smiled. "Deal, anything else?" "Yes, I want to go back to the Philippines with you. I want you to meet my family, see where I come from, understand that part of my life. And I want us to do it as equals, not as the billionaire and his former maid." "We've never been employer and employee," Jonathan said seriously. "Not really. Not since that first night when you blew out your birthday candle. We've been two people trying to figure out how to be together despite everything working against us. And we're going to keep figuring it out one day at a time." They found an apartment in a loft space with exposed brick and industrial windows that flooded the place with light. It was smaller than the mansion, more modern than Maria's condo, and it felt like neutral ground where they could build something new together. Maria contributed what she could to the costs, and Jonathan did not argue when she insisted on paying her share even though it was a tiny fraction of the overall expense. Maria threw herself into building her catering business with an energy born of desperation and determination. She registered the business, obtained the necessary licenses, and started taking on small events, birthday parties, corporate lunches, intimate dinners. She used recipes from her childhood Filipino dishes that her mother had taught her, combined with techniques she had learned from cooking for the. Her food was unique, a fusion of cultures and experiences, and word began to spread about the talented caterer with the unusual menu. Jonathan helped where he could, but Maria was careful to keep firm boundaries between his resources and her business. She accepted his advice on legal matters and accounting, but she refused his offers of investment capital or introductions to high-profile clients. This had to be hers, built on her own terms, or it would not mean anything. The trip to the Philippines happened in August, during what was supposed to be the slow season for Jonathan's business interests. They flew commercial rather than private, at Maria's insistence, and stayed in a modest hotel rather than a luxury resort. Maria wanted Jonathan to see her world as it actually was, without the buffer of wealth and privilege. Her family was waiting at the airport in Manila, and Maria felt her heart clench at the sight of them. Her mother looked older, grayer, more worn down by life. Her siblings had grown, was now studying nursing as she had dreamed, was in high school and taller than Maria remembered, and had become a teenager seemingly overnight. The reunion was emotional and awkward in equal measure. Maria's mother embraced her tightly, but with reserve, as if unsure whether her daughter was still the same person who had left all those years ago. Her siblings hung back, shy around Jonathan, uncertain how to act around this wealthy American man their sister had brought home. Jonathan handled it better than Maria had expected. He spoke slowly and clearly, mindful of the language barrier, and did not condescend or patronize. He listened when Maria's mother talked about the challenges of raising 3 children alone, about the sacrifices she had made. He toured the village where Maria had grown up, seeing the poverty that had driven her to America, understanding in a way words could never convey why she sent so much of her money home. One evening, they sat on the porch of her mother's small house, watching the sun set over the rice paddies. Maria's mother spoke to her in rapid Tagalog, and Maria translated for Jonathan. "She wants to know if you truly love me or if I'm just convenient," Maria said, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Jonathan looked Maria's mother in the eye and spoke directly to her, even though he knew she would not understand his words. Maria would translate. "I love your daughter more than I can express. She is the most remarkable person I have ever met. She saved me from a life that was killing me slowly, from a loneliness I did not even realize I was drowning in. I know our relationship is unusual, that it raises questions and concerns. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve her, trying to make her as happy as she has made me." Maria translated, her voice thick with emotion. Her mother listened, her weathered face unreadable, then responded in Tagalog. "She says actions matter more than words," Maria translated. "She says she will judge you by how you treat me in the years to come, not by what you promise tonight. And she says if you ever hurt me, she will find a way to make you regret it, no matter how rich and powerful you are." Jonathan laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "I would expect nothing less. Please tell your mother I understand and I accept her terms." The rest of the trip passed in a blur of family gatherings, tour of Maria's childhood haunts, and long conversations that helped bridge the gap between her past and present. By the time they returned to New York, Maria felt more grounded, more certain of who she was and what she wanted. Her catering business continued to grow throughout the fall. She hired her first employee, a young Filipino woman named Grace who reminded Maria of herself at that age, eager, determined to build a better life. She landed her first major contract, catering a corporate event for 200 people. The event was a success, and it led to more bookings, more opportunities, more validation that she could build something real on her own merits. Jonathan proposed on Maria's 33rd birthday, exactly 1 year after the night he had found her lighting a candle alone in his kitchen. He did not make a grand gesture or plan an elaborate surprise. Instead, he simply handed her a small box over breakfast and said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Maria had mentioned once that she found sapphires more interesting than the traditional diamond engagement ring, and Jonathan had remembered. "Yes," Maria said, slipping the ring onto her finger, "but I have some conditions about the wedding." Jonathan smiled. "Of course you do. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony that blended both their worlds. The service was held at a Catholic church in Brooklyn, with father who had baptized Maria's youngest sister flying in from the Philippines to officiate. The guest list was small and carefully curated: Maria's family, Jonathan's children, a handful of close friends from both sides. Did not attend, but she sent an expensive gift and a card that said simply, "Be good to each other." Maria wore a dress she designed herself, simple and elegant, with lace panels that incorporated traditional Filipino patterns. Jonathan wore a barong Tagalog, a traditional Filipino formal shirt, in honor of Maria's heritage. The reception was held at a restaurant in Brooklyn, and Maria catered it herself with Grace's help. They served a fusion menu that told the story of their relationship: Filipino dishes alongside American classics, traditional recipes reimagined with modern techniques. The food was delicious, and several guests asked for Maria's business card, which led to more catering contracts in the weeks that followed. During the reception, Jonathan pulled Maria aside to a quiet corner while the party continued around them. "A year ago," he said, "I came home to an empty house and found you celebrating your birthday alone. I thought it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. Now look at us, surrounded by people who love us, building a life together that neither of us could have imagined. How did we get so lucky?" Maria thought about all the obstacles they had overcome, all the judgment and skepticism and doubt. She thought about the risks she had taken, the bridges she had burned, the comfortable obscurity she had sacrificed. And she thought about what she had gained: love, partnership, a sense of belonging that went deeper than nationality or class or any of the superficial categories that were supposed to define her. "I don't know if it's luck," she said. "I think it's more that we were both brave enough to reach for something better even when everyone told us we shouldn't. You could have ignored me that night in the kitchen. I could have blown out my candle and sent you away. But we didn't. We chose each other, and we kept choosing each other even when it got hard." Jonathan kissed her, and around them the party continued, a celebration not just of their marriage but of the unlikely journey that had brought them together. Maria looked around at the faces of the people she loved: her mother laughing at something Bethany was saying, her siblings trying to teach Christopher a Filipino folk dance, Grace organizing the kitchen staff with the efficiency Maria had trained into her. This was her life now, built from the ruins of her old one, constructed piece by piece through courage and love and stubborn determination. It was not the life she had imagined when she first arrived in America with her single suitcase and broken English. It was better and stranger and more complicated than anything she could have planned. Later that night, after the guests had left and the restaurant had been cleaned, Maria and Jonathan returned to their loft. Maria kicked off her uncomfortable wedding shoes and collapsed on the couch, exhausted and happy. "Mrs. Jonathan said, testing out the name. "I'm keeping Santos professionally," Maria said. "The catering business is under my name and I want to keep it that way, but Maria Santos works. It honors where I came from and where I'm going." "Perfect," Jonathan said, settling beside her. "Just like you." "I'm not perfect," Maria said. "I'm stubborn and proud, and I still have nightmares about being deported even though I have my green card now. I still send too much money to my family and worry constantly that I'm not doing enough. I still feel like, and sometimes, like someone is going to realize I don't belong in your world and send me back to the servants' quarters." "My world isn't worth belonging to," Jonathan said seriously. "We're building our own world now, one that makes sense for us, one where it doesn't matter where we came from, only where we're going together." Maria leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the steady beating of his heart. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, lighting a birthday candle alone in someone else's kitchen, making a wish that seemed impossible. And she thought about the woman she was now, married to a man who saw her truly, building a business she was proud of, connected to her family in new and healthier ways. The wish had come true, but not in any way she could have predicted. She had wished for her family to have better opportunities, and they did. Was finishing her nursing degree with financial support from Maria's business, had been accepted to a good university, was getting art lessons. But more than that, Maria herself had opportunities she never dreamed possible. Not because of Jonathan's money or connections, though those helped, but because she had learned to believe she deserved them. "What are you thinking?" Jonathan asked, running his fingers through her hair. "That life is strange and unpredictable, and sometimes you find happiness in the last place you'd expect to look. And that I'm grateful I was brave enough to light that birthday candle, even alone in someone else's kitchen, because it brought you to me." "It brought us to each other," Jonathan corrected. "I was just as lost as you were, Maria. We saved each other." They sat in comfortable silence as the city hummed outside their windows, two people from different worlds who had built a bridge between them and decided to meet in the middle. It was not a fairy tale ending because real life was not a fairy tale. There would be more challenges ahead, cultural differences to navigate, families to blend, businesses to build, a whole life to construct together. But as Maria sat there on her wedding night, wearing a ring that symbolized forever, she felt something she had rarely experienced in her 33 years. Contentment. Not the temporary happiness of a good 2 years into their marriage, Maria stood in the kitchen of her first restaurant, supervising the final preparations before the grand opening. The space was intimate, seating only 40 people, located in a neighborhood in Queens with a large Filipino population. She had chosen the location deliberately, wanting to create something for her community, a place that celebrated her heritage while also welcoming everyone. The restaurant was called Which Meant Candle in Tagalog. The name was Jonathan's suggestion, a reference to the birthday candle that had changed both their lives. Maria had resisted at first, thinking it too sentimental, but eventually she came around to appreciating the symbolism. The candle represented hope in darkness, celebration in solitude, the small flame that could illuminate an entire room. Grace, her first employee who was now her head chef, was arranging plates with the precision of a surgeon. The menu they had developed together was ambitious, traditional Filipino dishes elevated with modern techniques, familiar flavors presented in unexpected ways. Adobo made with heritage pork and served with purple yam puree, sinigang with locally sourced vegetables and fresh seafood, halo-halo deconstructed and turned into an elaborate dessert course. "The restaurant critic from the Times is confirmed for tomorrow night," Grace said, her voice tight with nervous excitement. "Table 6, 8 o'clock reservation under a fake name." Maria felt her stomach clench. A review in the New York Times could make or break a restaurant, especially a small one run by an unknown chef. She had been cooking professionally for only 3 years, had no formal culinary training beyond what she had learned through experience and experimentation. Who was she to think she could compete with restaurants run by James Beard Award winners and Michelin-starred chefs? But then she looked around her restaurant, at the decor that blended traditional Filipino touches with modern design, at the staff she had trained personally, at the menu that told her story through food. This was hers. She had built it with her own hands, her own sweat, her own vision. Whatever the Times critic wrote, that truth remained. Jonathan arrived as the evening service was beginning, slipping into the kitchen through the back entrance. He had learned over the past 2 years when his presence was helpful and when it was a distraction, and he had gotten better at reading the signs. Tonight, Maria needed him to be invisible support rather than active participant. "How are you holding up?" he asked, stealing a piece of lechon from the prep station. "Terrified," Maria admitted, "but also excited. Is that normal?" "Completely normal. The same way I felt before my first major business deal. The terror means you care. The excitement means you believe in what you're doing." The first customers arrived right on time, and Maria watched from the kitchen as they were seated and presented with menus. Over the next 3 hours, she poured everything she had learned, everything she felt, everything she was into the food that went out of her kitchen. Each plate was a story, a memory, a piece of her journey from poverty in the Philippines to this moment of terrifying possibility. The evening passed in a blur of orders and plating, adjustments and corrections, the controlled chaos that was a restaurant in full operation. By the time the last dessert had been sent out and the final customers had left, Maria was exhausted but exhilarated. She collapsed into a chair in the empty dining room, her chef's white stained and her feet aching. Jonathan brought her a glass of wine and sat beside her. "I talked to a few customers on their way out," he said. "They loved it. Every single person I spoke to said they'd be back." "But what about the critic?" Maria asked. "Did you see anyone who might have been from the Times?" "I saw several people taking photos of their food and making notes. Could have been critics, could have been Instagram influencers, could have been regular people who like to document their meals. You won't know until the review comes out, and there's no point driving yourself crazy trying to guess. Maria knew he was right, but that did not stop her from obsessively checking her phone over the next few days, refreshing the Times website constantly, reading every food blog and Twitter thread that mentioned her restaurant. Had been open for a week when the review finally dropped. She was at home when Grace called, screaming so loudly that Maria had to hold the phone away from her ear. 3 stars, Grace shouted. The Times gave us 3 stars. Do you know how rare that is for a new restaurant, for any restaurant? Maria's hands shook as she pulled up the review on her laptop. The headline read, "Illuminates Queen's dining scene with brilliant Filipino cuisine." She read through the article with tears streaming down her face, hardly believing the words on the screen. The critic praised her innovative approach to traditional dishes, her skillful balance of flavors, the way she honored her heritage while pushing Filipino cuisine into new territory. There was criticism, too. The critic felt some dishes were overly ambitious, that the service needed polish, but the overall assessment was glowing. The final paragraph hit Maria especially hard. Chef Santos has created something special with, not just a restaurant, but a love letter to her heritage and her journey. In an industry often by pedigree and formal training, Santos proves that the most powerful credential is lived experience and a genuine passion for sharing one's story through food. This is cooking with soul, with history, with purpose. New York is lucky to have it. Jonathan found her still crying at the laptop an hour later. He read the review over her shoulder and then wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Look at what you've built." "We built it," Maria said. "I couldn't have done this without your support." "No," Jonathan said firmly. "I gave you some money and some advice, but you built this. Your vision, your recipes, your leadership. Don't diminish your own accomplishment by crediting me. This is yours, Maria. Own it." The review transformed overnight. Reservations flooded in, sometimes booked weeks in advance. Maria had to hire additional staff to handle the increased volume. Food bloggers and journalists started calling, wanting interviews, wanting to feature her story. She was invited to cook at charity events, to appear on local television shows, to participate in food festivals. The attention was overwhelming, and sometimes Maria missed the quiet anonymity of her old life. But she had learned something important over the past few years. Visibility had a cost, but invisibility had a greater one. She would rather be seen and judged than ignored and forgotten. Not everyone was happy about her success. Some members of the Filipino community accused her of commercializing their culture, of making traditional dishes too fancy and expensive for ordinary people. Others suggested that her success was due entirely to Jonathan's money and connections, that she was just another rich man's wife playing at being a chef. The criticism stung, but Maria had developed thicker skin. She addressed the concerns in interviews, explaining that her goal was to elevate Filipino cuisine to the same level of respect afforded to other Asian cuisines, to show that it deserved fine dining treatment. She acknowledged Jonathan's financial support, but also pointed out the thousands of hours she had spent perfecting her craft, the risks she had taken, the vision that was entirely her own. In response to concerns about accessibility, Maria started a lunch program offering simpler, more affordable versions of her dinner menu. She also began teaching cooking classes at a community center in Queens, sharing her knowledge with young Filipino Americans who wanted to connect with their heritage through food. Her relationship with her family in the Philippines had evolved into something healthier and more sustainable. Instead of sending money indiscriminately, Maria had worked with Jonathan's financial advisors to set up education funds for her siblings and a small business loan for her mother, who now ran a successful vegetable stand with proper infrastructure and employees. The shift from charity to investment had changed the dynamic, giving her family agency while also relieving Maria of the crushing obligation to be their sole support. Had graduated from nursing school and was now working at a hospital in Manila. Was in his second year at university, studying engineering. Had won a regional art competition and was being mentored by a professional artist. They all had their own lives, their own dreams, and while they still looked to Maria for guidance and support, it was no longer the desperate dependence of people with no other options. Maria's mother visited New York for the first time that summer, staying for a month to see the life her daughter had built. The visit was emotional and complicated, filled with moments of connection and moments of painful misunderstanding. Her mother struggled to reconcile the successful restaurateur with the daughter she remembered, struggled to understand how Maria could be happy in this loud, expensive, foreign city. But on her last night in New York, Maria took her mother to and cooked for her personally, preparing every dish her mother had taught her as a child, elevated and refined, but still recognizably the food of home. Her mother wept as she ate, tasting her own recipes transformed, seeing her daughter's journey expressed through the language they both understood best, food. "I was wrong to doubt you," her mother said in Tagalog, holding Maria's hands across the table. "I thought you were losing yourself in this new life, becoming someone I didn't recognize, but I see now that you've been finding yourself. You've taken everything I taught you, everything our culture gave you, and you've made it into something beautiful. I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner." The reconciliation healed something in Maria that she had not realized was broken. Her mother's approval meant more than any critic's review, any magazine feature, any professional accolade. It meant that she had successfully bridged her two worlds, honoring her past while building her future. Jonathan's relationship with his own children had also deepened over the years. Bethany had become one of Maria's close friends, often stopping by the restaurant to help during busy services or just to talk. She was engaged now to a woman named Sarah, and Maria was helping plan their wedding, offering catering services and advice. Christopher had finished business school and joined his father's company, but with a new focus on sustainable investments and social impact, rather than just profit maximization. Father and son worked together now with mutual respect and genuine affection, building on Jonathan's empire while also trying to make it more ethical and purposeful. Even had softened over time. She sent birthday cards to Maria, attended Bethany's engagement party without awkwardness, and once surprised Maria by making a reservation at and bringing a group of her society friends. The review she left online was brief but genuine. "Excellent food, impeccable service, a credit to New York's dining scene." On Maria's 35th birthday, Jonathan took her back to the mansion, which they had not visited in more than a year. He had sold off most of the property, keeping only a small section that he had converted into a foundation headquarters, the Santos Foundation, dedicated to supporting immigrant entrepreneurs and providing culinary education to communities. They walked through the mostly empty mansion, their footsteps echoing in rooms that had once been filled with furniture and staff and the weight of old money tradition. Jonathan led her to the kitchen where it had all begun, now stripped bare except for the built-in appliances and marble countertops. "Do you remember standing right here?" Jonathan asked, pointing to the spot where Maria had placed her birthday cupcake 3 years ago. "Lighting that candle, making your wish." "Every day," Maria said. "I think about what would have happened if you hadn't come home that night, if you hadn't stopped me from blowing out the candle. My whole life turned on that one moment." "Mine too," Jonathan said. He pulled out a small box from his pocket, and for a confused moment Maria thought he was proposing again. But when he opened it, she saw not a ring but a birthday candle, the same cheap kind from the dollar store, identical to the one she had used 3 years ago. "I want to start a tradition," Jonathan said. "Every year on your birthday, we light a candle together, and we remember how lucky we are, how improbable this all is, how easily we could have missed each other. We remember to be grateful." Maria took the candle from the box, her eyes stinging with tears. Jonathan produced a lighter and a small cupcake he had been hiding, and they recreated that first birthday in the empty kitchen, the candle flickering between them. "Make a wish," Jonathan said. Maria closed her eyes and thought about what she wanted now. Not rescue, not security, not even success. She wished for continuation, for this happiness to sustain, for their love to deepen, for the life they had built together to keep growing and evolving. She wished for wisdom to navigate the challenges ahead, for strength to face inevitable difficulties, for the courage to keep choosing each other every day. She blew out the candle, and Jonathan kissed her in the darkened kitchen. "What did you wish for?" he asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Maria said, but she was smiling. "I'll take that as a good sign." They left the mansion and returned to their real life, the loft, the restaurant, the foundation, the family and friends who made up their world. Maria had a full day ahead of her tomorrow, a new dish to test for the fall menu, a meeting with potential investors who wanted to help her expand into a second location, a cooking class to teach at the community center. It was not the life she had imagined when she first came to America with her single suitcase and limited English. It was not the life she thought she was wishing for when she lit that birthday candle alone in someone else's kitchen. It was infinitely better, infinitely more complex, infinitely more hers. That night, lying in bed next to Jonathan, Maria thought about the woman she had been and the woman she had become. She thought about all the invisible women like her, working in the shadows of other people's lives, making everything run smoothly while receiving little recognition or respect. She thought about the courage it took to step into visibility, to claim space in a world not designed for people like her. And she thought about candlelight, how even the smallest flame could illuminate a room, could bring people together, could transform an ordinary moment into something magical. She had been that small flame once, burning alone in the darkness. Now she was surrounded by light, the light of her restaurant, her marriage, her community, her success. "Jonathan," she whispered in the darkness. "Ahem. Thank you for seeing me, for really seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else." He pulled her closer, his breath warm against her hair. "Thank you for letting me see you, for trusting me enough to show me who you really are, for being brave enough to build this life with me." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two people from different worlds who had met in a kitchen over a birthday candle, and decided to illuminate each other's darkness. Outside, New York hummed with its endless energy, millions of stories unfolding simultaneously, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in infinite combinations. But in that moment, in that bed, Maria and Jonathan existed in their own small universe, built from wishes and courage and the willingness to take enormous risks for the possibility of genuine connection. It was not perfect, nothing real ever was, but it was theirs, and that made it beautiful. The candle had long since burned out, the wish had been made and granted, and tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But tonight, on her 35th birthday, Maria Santos lay next to the man she loved, in a life she had built with her own hands, and felt something she had once thought impossible for someone like her. She felt like she belonged. Not because someone had given her permission or made space for her, but because she had claimed that space herself, had insisted on her own worth, had refused to remain invisible no matter how much easier that might have been. She had lit her own candle, made her own wish, and had the courage to believe she deserved to see it come true. And in the darkness of their bedroom, in the quiet hours before dawn, Maria smiled. She had started with nothing but hope and determination, had faced obstacles that would have defeated lesser people, had risked everything for a chance at something better. And she had won. Not because she was lucky, though luck had played its part, but because she was brave and stubborn and unwilling to accept that her life had to be small and invisible and defined by other people's needs. The birthday candle had been just wax and wick, a cheap dollar store item that most people would not look at twice. But Maria had transformed it into something more, a symbol of hope, a catalyst for change, a small light that had illuminated the path to an entirely new life. And if she could do that with a birthday candle, she thought, imagine what else was possible. The future stretched ahead of her, unknown and full of potential. There would be more struggles, more growth, more moments of doubt and fear. But there would also be more candlelight, more wishes, more chances to choose courage over comfort, visibility over safety. And Maria was ready for all of it. She closed her eyes and drifted into sleep, dreaming of the restaurant she would build next, the recipes she would create, the lives she would touch through her food and her story. Dreaming of birthdays spent surrounded by love rather than alone in someone else's kitchen. Dreaming of all the candles still to be lit, all the wishes still to be made, all the possibilities still waiting to be illuminated by a brave woman willing to step out of the shadows and into the light. The story that had begun with such loneliness and longing had become something rich and complex and deeply fulfilling. And the best part was that it was far from over. This was not an ending but a continuation, not a destination but a journey that would keep unfolding for years to come. Maria Santos, former maid, current chef and restaurateur, wife and friend and daughter and immigrant, slept peacefully in her own bed, in her own home, in a life entirely of her own making. And somewhere in the darkness, invisible but undeniable, the flame of possibility continued to burn, waiting for the next person brave enough to light their own candle and make their own wish for something better day or a pleasant moment. But a deep, abiding sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly the right person, building exactly the life she was meant to live. The candle had been blown out, the wish made. And somehow, impossibly, wonderfully, it had all come true. That would make her status in America permanent and independent of her employment. The process would take time and money, but it was possible something that would change everything.